Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernst Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. This coming up Saturday in college basketball is every college basketball fan's dream day because you've got massive matchups all over the place, all over the country, including a triple header on ESPN that starts out with the Houston Cougars traveling on the road to the Kansas Jayhawks. And then later in the day, you've got Carolina playing the Duke Blue Devils at home. And then you also have Tennessee traveling to the Kentucky Wildcats as well. So it's going to be an amazing day of college basketball on Saturday. But I'm going to start out by previewing the Houston Cougars traveling to the Kansas Jayhawks. This is a battle for the Big 12. Houston is currently in the lead in the conference with a 6-2 record. Kansas is 5-3 in the conference. Currently, they're one game back. But that shows you how tough the Big 12 is. Because in a lot of conferences right now, the team at the top only has one loss in conference play, but Houston already has 2 losses, but they're a fantastic team. But the Big 12, it is a gauntlet week in and week out, and both of these teams are going to have to give it everything they've got if they want to come out with a win here. But I'm going to predict who I believe is going to win this massive Big 12 matchup on Saturday in college basketball, so let's get into it. The Houston Cougars, they're 19-2, and they're 6-2 in the Big 12, and Kelvin Sampson, he has done a fantastic job at the Houston Cougars after he was the head coach of Indiana back in the late 2000s, but he got fired for allegations. But after he was allowed to coach college basketball again, he found a home with Houston, and he has turned them from a program that was able to win at a high level in the American Conference. But when they made the move to the Big 12, a lot of people were concerned, would he still be able to win big games? Would he be able to recruit enough talent that he would be able to compete against Kansas and Texas and Baylor and these other teams in the Big 12? And the answer so far has been yes, because they've done a really good job this year. And if you look at their schedule, they've gone out there and gotten wins over the Xavier Musketeers and the Utah Utes in non-conference play and the Texas A&M Aggies. But then once they entered conference play, they had a 2-game skid losing at Iowa State and at TCU. But since then, they've beaten Texas Tech, BYU, and at Texas. So Houston doesn't really have too many signature wins. Like, they don't have that win over a top 10 team, and they could get it here at the Kansas Jayhawks. But because they haven't had a ridiculously tough schedule, it's been hard, but it hasn't been one of the toughest in college basketball. That's actually helped out their net ranking because Houston has also beaten a lot of teams by a hefty margin this season, which helps in the computer metrics. They are currently the #1 team in college basketball in the net ranking. They're 7-2 in quad 1 games, and they are undefeated in all of the other quad metrics as well. And if you look at the bracket matrix, they are a 1 seed. So Houston is doing great right now in college basketball. Even if they lose this game, it's not going to hurt them at all whatsoever. But if they do beat the Kansas Jayhawks, that would signify that they are currently the best team in the Big 12, that they could probably win the Big 12 conference if they can keep up this level of play, and they can get a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And if you look at the roster that Kelvin Sampson has assembled, LJ Cryer, the Baylor transfer, that was a really surprising transfer when he made the move. No one would have thought that a guy would go from Baylor as a starter to Houston, but here we are. LJ Cryer did it, and that shows you how good of a job Kelvin Sampson has done when players of his caliber want to play for you. He's averaging 15 points per game. Jamal Shead is averaging 12 points per game. Emmanuel Sharp's averaging 12 points per game. And then if you look down the rest of the roster, yes, there's a lot of guys that don't average a lot of points, but these guys compete. Damian Dunn, the Temple transfer, averaging 8 points per game. Joseph Tugler averages 4 points per game, but he's a very tough player on the low block. They've got a lot of guys that fight and hustle and play at a high level. But as everybody is beginning to figure out how good of a coach Kelvin Sampson is, or maybe you've already known for a while, if you really pay attention to college basketball, no one needs an introduction to Bill Self. Bill Self has had the Kansas Jayhawks consistently at the top of the Big 12 year in and year out. They were winning the conference like 15 years straight. It was absolutely unbelievable. But now he has more competition with the Baylor Bears and now the Houston Cougars joining the conference. But Kansas, they're still really good, but they've had a few slip-ups this season with a 5-3 record in conference play, and they've lost 4 games overall. And as you can see, that win over Kentucky, that was a really good win in the non-conference. They lost to Marquette, no shame in that, because Shaka Smart is a great squad this season. They beat Tennessee, knocked off UConn. That was a huge win. Then they were able to beat Indiana on the road in Bloomington. That's always tough. But then in conference play, they lost at UCF, not the best loss in the world. UCF's having a decent year, though. Then they beat Oklahoma, but then they had the bad loss at West Virginia. West Virginia is not having a great season. Yes, they're still a tough team, and that's a tough environment in Morgantown, but should not have lost that game. But then they also lost at Iowa State, but then they were able to knock off Oklahoma State by 30 to get back on track at home. And now they've got this big showdown in Fog Allen against the Houston Cougars, which is going to be a massive matchup for Kansas if they want to regain control of being at the top of the Big 12, and they would be top in the standings at 6-3 in the conference if they can get this win. And you can tell Kansas still plays much better at home. Fog Allen is such a tough environment. It's very hard for teams to go in there, especially with that crowd who's one of the loudest in college basketball, and sometimes you don't get calls to go your way when you're the road team. It is so tough to win there. You look at the Kansas Jayhawks roster that Bill Self has. It's talented as always. Kevin McCullough, the Texas Tech transfer, he's playing better basketball this year for Kansas than he ever has in college basketball. He's averaging 20 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. Hunter Dickinson, the Michigan transfer, is averaging 18 points, 11 rebounds. He's one of the only players in college basketball averaging a double-double. KJ Adams is improved, averaging 13 points per game. And then kind of like Houston, the rest of these guys, they all contribute. None of them are really standout players. Johnny Furphy, a freshman, has done well at 8 points per game. But DeJuan Harris, he's a facilitator, averaging 7 points and 7 assists, which is a unique stat line of college basketball. Most guys don't average as many assists as they do points, but that's what DeJuan Harris does when you've got a team that's as talented as Kansas. Get it to your teammates and good things will happen. Marco Jackson, another freshman, is averaging 4 points per game, and Nicholas Timberlake, the Towson transfer, is averaging 4 points per game as well. But we know the talent that both of these teams have. Probably Kansas is the more talented team on paper, but Houston has some solid players as well. And Kelvin Sampson, a great head coach. His teams always play great defense, but it's going to be tough in Fog Allen. So who do I believe is going to get this big win in the Big 12 on Saturday in college basketball and can really help out their chances of winning the Big 12 conference this season and possibly help them get a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament? Because if you look at the Kansas Jayhawks right now, they're number 13 in the net. So they are a bit behind Houston overall in the computer numbers. They're putting up good numbers when it comes to the quadrants with a 5-3 quad 1 record. They only have the 1 loss in quad 3 to West Virginia. And when you look at the bracket matrix, Kansas is a number 2 seed. So this win would help them move up in the standings. But I will point out a few key stats that I think are going to make a difference in this game. The Houston Cougars, while they are one of the best teams in college basketball on defense, Kelvin Sampson's always been known for his teams being very good on that side of the ball. But the issue here is that they only shoot 67.8% at the free throw line. And when you're playing at a tough environment in Fog Allen, and sometimes it is very tough to get the whistle, you have to be able to take advantage of the opportunities you do get at the free throw line. And it's going to be very tough for them to do that when the team as a whole doesn't shoot that well at the line. Yes, they've got a couple guys that shoot really well, like LJ Cryer, 88%, Jamal Shedd shoots 71%, Emmanuel Sharp shoots 83%, but the rest of the team really struggles. And guys that usually get fouled more are the bigs, and the bigs for Houston struggle at the line. They shoot decent from 3 at 35%. Their field goal percentage isn't that great at 43%, but Houston does take care of the ball. They only turn the ball over 9 times per game, so that will help in a road environment. And the Kansas Jayhawks, if you look at their numbers, Kansas shoots 36% from the three-point line, 74% from the free throw line, so they do a much better job at the line, and they shoot 50% from the field. They do average a few more turnovers per game than the Houston Cougars, and they don't do as well at assists and blocks as Houston. That's why Houston is a better defensive team. But that's where this is going to come down to. Houston has to defend at a very high level if they're going to have any shot to win this game over Kansas. If they let this game get into the 70s, Kansas will win this game. It has to be a game in the 60s for the Cougars to have a shot. I believe their defense will travel. Kelvin Sampson's going to get them playing hard, but I believe Houston will miss a few more free throws than the Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas will be able to pound the ball inside to Hunter Dickinson, and he's going to get to the line a lot. I believe Houston's big will slow him down a bit, but it's going to be very tough for them to contain him all game long. Houston's guards, they're going to make life tough for DeJuan Harris and the other guards for the Kansas Jayhawks, but I think they're going to do just enough on the offensive end to be able to combat that great Houston defense. I'm going to go with the Kansas Jayhawks to bounce back. I know they beat Oklahoma State last time out, but they've been struggling a little bit the last few weeks, losing at UCF and also at West Virginia. I think the Kansas Jayhawks are going to knock off the Houston Cougars 71-68. Kansas is going to get to that 70-point threshold that I believe will be enough for the Jayhawks to win this game. Houston really needs this game to stay in the 60s, but I believe with Fog Allen Fieldhouse being on their side, Kansas rarely loses at home, and Houston's only 2 losses are on the road this season. I believe they will fall short to the Kansas Jayhawks by a hair. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about whether you think that Kelvin Sampson's squad, their defense is going to travel and they're going to do enough to cause the Kansas Jayhawks guards fits, and they're going to get this win and remain at the top of the Big 12 standings and make it tough for the Kansas Jayhawks to win the Big 12 this season? Or do you believe that Kansas will right the ship, get a huge home win in a top 10 battle over the Houston Cougars, and Kansas will be able to tie up Kelvin Sampson's squad in the standings in the Big 12 this season? Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.